Good afternoon, everybody. This is another edition of the Passball Show. Happy, as always, to be with you. First day of May, 2018. Lots of stuff we're going to get into in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. Just reminding everybody that this is your show. So anything that's on your mind in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America that you want to talk about or you want to become a central point of the program and the broadcast, please just comment, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about the things that are on my mind. And you know what? If it's something that doesn't appeal to you, why don't you tell me what it is that appeals to you and what you think are the big stories going on in the world of sports that you're itching to get your own, opinion in. A couple things that I want to talk about because I think about the city of New York as it stands. And if you listen to my program last week, it's views that I've expressed for years. So it's not like I just decided to think this way. New York and its series of sports fans kind of hold themselves in a different category. They have I don't know if it's a superiority complex, but, they really believe, and a lot of New York fans believe, that sports do not exist in other regions. And my reminder, and the last point I'm going to make about this before I move on, is that the only people that believe that are the New York sports fans themselves. You ask people in other regions, and they believe that they, have passion, that they love sports, that, in some cases they believe they have the best fans in the world. But if you listen to what's going on in the world of New York sports, it seems like there's been, obviously, Mike Francesa coming back to WFAN is a big deal. And I don't think that it should be taken lightly. But the content of New York stations have been so obsessed with what is going on in a WFAN program and lineup that they've seemed to have missed what's really going on in the world of sports. And it's a great weekend if you are a New York sports fan. You follow the Mets as they're out on the West Coast, currently in first place in the National League East. The Yankees, who just finished the weekend with a 9-game winning streak, beating the likes of the Los Angeles Angels, a very good team in the American League West, 3 straight times, matched up yesterday against a very good Houston Astros team, and a game that, there's a lot to talk about. But, right now, right on the heart of the minds of all New York sports fans is the programming lineup at WFAN. And for, a fan base that does, enjoy its sports, in some cases, and it's certainly in the minds of the people from the region, better than anybody in the country, there's more important things going on in the world of sports than the programming lineup at WFAN. You can start with the NFL draft. You got the Giants picking number 2 and taking Saquon Barkley out of the University of Penn State. You got Sam Darnold from USC going to the New York Jets. And everything that goes back to thinking about what was involved in that. Think about the Jets. Expected to have such a bad season last year. Hope was that they were going to suck for Sam. That they were going to have the worst record in the NFL and be rewarded with the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Now, they won 5 games. They overachieved up to an extent. Did lose a couple close games and probably could have finished with a better record based off of their performance. So their performance last year wasn't that bad, and certainly wasn't bad enough to warrant the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So things work out a certain way. The Browns, for whatever reason, decide to take Baker Mayfield with the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Perhaps it was a guy that they wanted. Maybe they thought would be available for them with the number 4 overall pick. And the thought was the Jets moving up by making a trade with the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, the Jets ended up with the number 6 pick, which obviously wasn't in the top 3, wasn't in a position, based off of where they stood to be able to pick, one of the top 4 quarterbacks per se. With the number 6 overall pick, you can make a case that the top 4 quarterbacks, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen, could have all be off the board before the Jets were to picked with the number 6 overall pick. So with that, obviously, comes the need for them to trade up in the draft and get the number 3 pick. And obviously that impacted what the Cleveland Browns ended up doing. And the Cleveland Browns are in a spot where they are blessed, obviously with a 0-16 season, nothing to be happy about, but with that, benefited from having the opportunity to pick, number one overall, take, the number one quarterback in their minds, what they thought was the best quarterback with the best set of qualities and the potential to have the best future to lead the team for the next 10 years. So the Browns, perhaps overthinking it, saying, you know what, if we took, Saquon Barkley with the number one overall pick and the Giants, the Jets, end up getting a chance to pick, then, Sam Darnold and perhaps Baker Mayfield could be off the board by the time they have a chance to pick with the number 4 overall pick. They may have overanalyzed things. They decided, hey, we're going to take Mayfield because that's the guy that we wanted in the first place. And Saquon Barkley's probably going to go to the Giants. They end up taking, Ward, the defensive back, who's probably the best defensive back in the entire draft, and away they go. But, the focus, and this is, I guess, what has been frustrating me. You look at a weekend that had so much stuff involved, the entire NFL draft, how New York-centric it was set at being because of everything that was involved with the teams being so bad. The Giants with the 2 pick, the Jets with the 3 pick. And, what everybody wants to talk about is what the WFAN afternoon program and lineup is going to be. I mean, you got the Mets, who I don't think the Mets are the biggest story. And in fact, if I'm going to do Giants, Jets, Yankees, Mets, I would say that the Giants, Jets, and Yankees are probably a bigger story in this region than the New York Mets. The Mets obviously blessed with an 11-1 start. And listen, they've come back down to earth. I think they're playing good enough baseball. But certainly if you look at that division, they got some competition. Not just with the Washington Nationals, who I'm going to touch on in a little bit, off to a bad start. Certainly the team that seems to be leaps and bounds better than anybody else in that division. But you got the Braves, who the Mets play over the next 3 games at Citi Field, and the Philadelphia Phillies, who not only are off to good starts, but as franchises look like they've finally turned the corner. You look at Scott Kingery with the Phillies. You look at, Ronald Acuna with the Atlanta Braves. You look at a couple guys that, are expected to be key contributors and key leaders down the road to new prominence to a team that has struggled for many years. And you got the Mets, who are kind of in the middle. Some people may say, and I'm sure people outside of New York may believe that the Mets' time has passed. The Mets getting to the World Series in 2015, perhaps a year earlier, perhaps in a spot where you could say that the Mets had success a little bit sooner than they were supposed to. 2015 was supposed to be, all right, a season that they were supposed to get themselves competitive, perhaps be in a good pennant race, but maybe fall a little short. Maybe if all things went right, pretty similar to what the Braves and the Phillies are going through this year, hey, if everything goes right, maybe you could land one of the wild card spots. Maybe for a lot of your younger players, you could get the experience of what it's like to play in a postseason game. As we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show, John Pielli with you. Please feel free to comment on the Periscope feed or Facebook Live. Let me know what's on your mind. Right now we're talking a little bit about baseball, and the fact that from a New York fan's perspective, I don't know if there's enough attention being drawn to it. We care about what the afternoon drive is on WFAN a little bit more than what's going on with the current teams. But you have, once again, the Mets right now in a position where not only are they off to a good start with 17 wins in first place in the National League East, but a division which was not expected to be so competitive. I thought a lot of from a perspective of what to expect from the season, the Mets were going to be second place in that division by fault. The Nationals were expected to run away with the division and expected to run away for this reason. Bryce Harper, Gio Gonzalez, Daniel Murphy at the end of the season are going to become free agents. And the Washington Nationals looking into 2019 are probably going to be a lot different. And, do they have the capital or the interest to pay Bryce Harper the money that he's looking for? Do they feel that Daniel Murphy has earned enough to get a big-time contract in his 30s? Gio Gonzalez, who very quietly, when we talk about Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg, has been one of the most consistent pitchers in all of Major League Baseball and fits that team perfectly as their number 3 starter. Are they willing to let him walk, where perhaps he could get a more lucrative offer from a team that's kind of rebuilding? Or maybe a team that looks at Gonzalez and his 200 innings that he provides basically every single season and says, hey, if I slap this guy into my rotation as my number 2 or even my number 1, I have younger pitchers that are coming up that could kind of, be mentored by this guy and could also grow with the presence of somebody that as long as he's healthy, which he's been over the last several years, especially throughout the term of his Washington Nationals contract, that, he may be a better fit somewhere else. So that the Nationals potentially pay Gio Gonzalez a little bit more to stay. So I look at the sense of urgency for the Washington Nationals, and obviously you follow them. 3 of the last 4, division titles in the NL East. They haven't gotten past the first round. They seem to blame it on the manager every single time, whether it was, Davey Johnson or Matt Williams or Dusty Baker, are on their 4th manager in the last, 6 or 7 years. So, this is a team that should be feeling a little more of a sense of urgency, and certainly a sense of urgency to win that division. And I'm interested to see what is contributing the most to their slow start. Are they feeling a little bit of the pressure? Because it's not just coming from the Mets, it's coming from the Braves and it's coming from the Phillies. So the Washington Nationals, who really had 3 of the last 4 seasons where they controlled the NL East, they were superior to the competition by that much. It was the Washington Nationals and then the field. And it was almost a foregone conclusion. Even in 2015, which obviously the Mets end up winning the division, and you look back in time, you say, hey, maybe that was a little bit of an upset. But, the Nationals have controlled the NL East for so long. The fact that this may be the last year that they keep everything together the way it's constructed with their talent, with Harper, with Murphy, with Gio Gonzalez, and potentially coming in the next season, who are going to be the next players that are going to emerge? Is it Trey Turner or is it Anthony Rendon? Do they become the absolute leaders on that team? You obviously have Scherzer. You obviously have Strasburg. These are guys that are going to be with the Nationals for quite a while. But is this their last chance to really put it all together? And it coincides with something very interesting. And what's interesting is the fact that, perhaps the Mets have finally put it together. They're going to have that year that a lot of fans expected them to have in 2017 if it wasn't for all the injuries. But the Braves and the Phillies, who I don't think have gotten enough attention, and I mentioned this in spring training, I mentioned this in the offseason, if one of these 2 teams can take the necessary steps to getting to the next level and becoming a potential playoff team this year, how is it going to impact not only the rest of the NL East, but the rest of the National League? And if I'm the Nationals, I'm concerned for 3 reasons. I'm concerned because of the slow start. The slow start is something that, unfortunately, they were ill-afforded to do as opposed to past seasons. If you look back at 2016, or you look back at 2015, 2014, and 2013, or even last year, the Nationals, for the most part, for the exception of the Braves winning the division in 2013 and Mets winning the division in 2015, the other seasons, they could afford to get off to a slow start because of where they ended up finishing. The rest of the teams were not equipped or had reasons and things that happened to them that put them in a lesser position than the Washington Nationals. The Nationals, if they let their stretch of games, which they haven't won as many as they were expected to, they obviously got injuries. Daniel Murphy's out. Anthony Rendon is out. They certainly, need to get those guys back, and they expect them to be back in the short term as opposed to down the road. But you look at the Nationals, and I'll tell you, I'm a little concerned if I'm a Washington Nationals fan, and if I'm out in the city, the nation's capital, focusing on the Nationals and the expectations for them to take that next step, get past the NLDS, and potentially make a run to the World Series in 2018. I'm concerned for this start for three reasons. Number one, obviously, you get off to a slow start. You got more games you got to make up down the road. Number two, you got the Mets, who obviously on the heels of that 11-1 start, have a 6-game lead, 7 in a loss column as we speak today on May 1st. But most importantly, what are the Phillies and what are the Atlanta Braves? Because these are teams that have spent a couple of years rebuilding. They've spent a couple of years developing players in the minor leagues and have finally got themselves in a position where a lot of these guys are up and their talents are showing. You look at what's happening with the Phillies from, adding Arrieta and Santana in what could have been a transition year, but them deciding to up the ante a little bit by bringing in a couple legitimate proven veterans that have played in a postseason, veterans that have played in World Series. And they're a different team right now than they were last year. And the Atlanta Braves, who just promoted a guy that may be the best overall prospect in Major League Baseball in Ronald Acuna. And him being up there, doing the things that he's doing, hitting long home runs, obviously looking right off the bat like he fits in. You look at the Braves, and I'll tell you, I'm scared. If I'm the Nationals, not only am I a little bit concerned over the Mets right now, what the Mets are doing, but I'd be concerned over what the Braves and the Phillies are doing. Because I know you play a lot of games within the division. And I understand that. But you look at the amount of games that you play outside of the division. And that's going to allow for the team like the Braves or the team like the Phillies or even the Mets to establish themselves. If these teams can win games outside of the division, then the Nationals are going to lose that control that they have to beat these teams, which, by the way, they have to do. They haven't shown the propensity to do that at the rate that they have in seasons past. So I think that's a concern, but also they're going to lose at some point the control that they've had to be able to win games in division. Because you win these games in division, it may not matter as much. How many games are they going to fall behind in the National League East? How many, there's 6 behind the Mets right now, 7 in the loss column. I understand it's only May 1st. And I'm not going to make such a big deal about, baseball as it stands in the standings on May 1st. But in past years, when you could say it's easy for a team that has maybe a little bit of a superiority in regards to talent, maybe is a little bit deeper than some of the other teams in the division, you'd say, all right, let it play out. Let the cream rise to the top. By the end of May or sometime in June, we expect to see the Nationals 10, 12, 15 games over 500 where they belong. But what if the talent in the National League East is catching up to the Washington Nationals? What if the Mets turn out to be, I don't know, at least somewhat close to what we've seen over the first month of the season? They finished, April, 8 games over 500, which I'm sure very few people expected coming into the season. But you look at the Braves and you look at the Phillies, and I'm telling you, both of these teams are very good. And I'm not saying, the 2 NL wild cards are going to come out of this division. They may, but I don't think it's a guarantee. I like the Cardinals. I think the Dodgers, in spite of suffering some real tough injuries, first to Justin Turner, and of course the terrible news yesterday that Corey Seager is going to have Tommy John surgery and miss the rest of the season, it's going to be a big blow to that team. The Dodgers have spent a lot of years succeeding in the National League. The NL West seems like, for the most part, it's been theirs. I mean, think about the pace that they were playing at last year. There was no question that the Dodgers were going to win that division. But they also had 2 of the next best teams in the National League, the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Colorado Rockies, who almost, to a certain extent, went wire to wire to capture the 2 National League wildcard spots. But there was no doubt that the Dodgers were going to win that division. There's no doubt that the Dodgers were going to have an advantage in being able to win, let's say, 5 to 7 or 8 more games in the 2017 season than those other teams, even though those other teams are pretty good. But I tell you, you look at the way the National League wild card is set up, you can't rule the Braves out. You can't rule the Phillies out. And, how much it impacts the Mets, I think, it's up in the air. But it's certainly something that the Washington Nationals need to be conscious of. And I said, looking back at this year and how important it was for the Nationals to finally put it together, because you don't know how it's going to look next season, is a big deal, of course, but also the talent in that division in the National League East has gotten a lot better. Yeah, I don't know what the Mets are. I don't know if they're a team that could have the ability to run wire to wire. I think, offensively they got to produce a little more. You got a team that's batting, 239 as a team. You got a starting rotation that's known for, the power arms that they got. Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom are pitching very well, but they don't really have anything else. And certainly looking at, the 3 through 5 in the Mets rotation, it's a question mark. Whether it's Zach Wheeler, whether it's Steven Matz, whether it's Jason Vargas, Matt Harvey, whoever's being thrown out there, it's replacement level. Or if anything, maybe slightly above replacement level because of the strikeouts. They're striking guys out, but there's a lot of guys on base. There's a lot of innings where, it's kind of a battle just to get them through it. To get 5 innings out of any one of those starters is almost a stretch at this point. So I'm not 100% sold on the Mets. And I think they're a better offensive team than they showed, certainly with Cespedes, Bruce, and Conforto, the numbers they've put up to this point. But they don't have a catcher. And the bullpen, it's pretty similar to many other teams in baseball, has been overworked. So, I look at the Braves and the Phillies, and the question I guess I have is, how far are they going to go with this? Because I don't think either one of these teams right now are a fluke. I think they're both legitimate contenders. I think they have the ability, certainly, to get through the first half in a position where they could be buyers as opposed to sellers. And if they do that, certainly in Philadelphia, where they have the budget, where they have the ability to take on another contract that they need to, I think they're going to go for it. So you got these two teams that if they are, let's say, 5 to 7 games over 500 at the All-Star break, as they get into July, as they get close to July 31st and the trading deadline, then they're going to look to improve themselves as opposed to standing pat or potentially selling off players. So that could potentially mean that these teams are only going to get better. So the NL East, my big concern would certainly be with the Washington Nationals, because I don't think this is one of those seasons where you can say, hey, the Nationals can play however they want in April, and it's going to be so easy for them to make up the ground. Now, they can make up the ground against the Miami Marlins, who may very well be as bad as we thought coming into the season. But I don't think there's easy wins against the Braves or the Phillies or the Mets. And the Mets have to be conscious of that, too, as they play the Atlanta Braves. They have a homestand where they got 3 against the Braves and 3 against the Colorado Rockies. And I look at it, and I can't quite guarantee that these teams are going to be, I look at, the next 6 games, and I think the Mets have to treat this as if they're playing 2 playoff teams. And perhaps act as if this is August as opposed to September, in September as opposed to April going into May. I think it's important how they do on his homestand. I don't expect them to sweep these 6 games, but I think they should focus, or the important thing, just like any other series, should be to win 2 out of 3 against the Braves, win 2 out of 3 against the Colorado Rockies, because I think it matters. I think it matters a little more now than if they didn't get off to such a good start. But also, the Washington Nationals are reeling right now. I don't think any of these 6 games coming up with the Braves and the Rockies are going to be easy. But I think the importance of winning these 2 series is going to say a lot to how the National League East looks in the next couple weeks. I mean, if the Braves come to Citi Field and sweep the Mets, the Braves will be in first place. And I don't know if it's something that they could, stand. I don't know if it can necessarily maintain itself. But I look at, the Atlanta Braves, and I think from a pitching standpoint, with Teheran and Foltynewicz and Sean Newcomb, I think they have enough pitching that they could compete. They could be in the games and allow their offense with Acuna, Ozzie Albies, who's having a great year. He's certainly developed himself as one of the better young players in the game. Freddie Freeman, the game's late and close. I certainly trust him to come up with the big hit. Jose Bautista, they signed as a free agent, and I don't know what that's really going to mean. what can you really expect after Jose Bautista? He had such a terrible year last year, playing in 157 games. Honestly, the only reason that he was out there playing was because the Blue Jays were out of the pennant race. Pretty similar to Matt Harvey pitching for the Mets in August and September. The Mets that had decided to be sellers were so much out of it, were not expecting to make a run for the postseason, that it didn't matter if Matt Harvey went out there and gave up 6 runs in 4 innings, which he essentially did for the better part of the second half of the season. Jose Bautista going 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts day in and day out didn't matter for the Toronto Blue Jays because they were so far out of the pennant race and they were focusing on 2018. But looking back at, what the Braves could be, I think a guy like Bautista could potentially give them, the younger players a little bit of a jolt. Bring in a veteran player who's played in the postseason. He's hit 54 home runs in a season. He has led, groups of star players before. So Acuna and Albies and Dansby Swanson, and Fultonevich and Newcomb. They could all kind of get together and say, hey, Bautista's a proven winner. And he hasn't won a World Series, but he's been to a couple American League Championship Series in a row. But the question's going to come down to how much Jose Bautista has left. Because Jose Bautista, the name, is not enough to push the Atlanta Braves in the right direction. He's got a chance to play his home games in Atlanta, which based off of the location in Cobb County of the stadium and the way, the wind kind of fluctuates and circulates in that stadium, has become a very good hitter's ballpark. So maybe he goes out there, hits some home runs, maybe cuts down on his strikeouts, the 170 strikeouts he had last year, which was by far a career high. Can he play third base after almost 5 years without really playing the position any more than a couple times a year? Can he fit in a lineup, which, is certainly getting a lot of help from Albies. Dansby Swanson's off to a good start. Freddie Freeman is Freddie Freeman. Acuna has acclimated himself very well. Does he lengthen the lineup? Could he get better pitches to hit, maybe hitting behind Freddie Freeman? I don't know. It's going to come down to how much Jose Bautista has left. And hopefully he's in a position to play baseball where he can join the Major League roster sooner rather than later. But I tell you, I look at the NL East, and I looked at this season and I said, wow, that division looks weak. You got the Braves and the Phillies rebuilding. The Marlins look terrible. The Mets, I don't know what to expect after last year. Bringing back Jay Bruce. A guy that was on their team last year. Cabrera and Reyes coming back, having almost the same clubhouse chemistry when it seemed to all fall apart, when things didn't go well for the team last year. How much can we believe and trust in that team? And those were all legitimate questions. But, the Nationals are in a very tough spot. But I'll tell you, the NL East is turning out to be a very fun division to watch. Because I think the Braves and the Phillies are for real. In fact, I'm a little more sure about the Braves and the Phillies than I am the Mets. Now, I think the Mets are still going to be good. I had them pegged at about 84 wins coming into the beginning of the season. Their performance hasn't really changed my thought either way. I don't think less of them because of the good start. I certainly don't think more of them because they had that 11-1 stretch, because there's been a lot of, things that I'd be concerned about as a fan. The offense hitting 239. The strength of the team, which is supposed to be the starting rotation, outside of Syndergaard and DeGrom, they've got absolutely nothing. The bullpen, yes, the bullpen got off to a good start, but it's going to be a matter of time before these guys get overused because the starters aren't going deeper into games. Adrian Gonzalez had a big game on Sunday, driving in 5 runs in his hometown of San Diego, where he certainly felt more comfortable. He's off to a bad start. They're getting nothing from their catching position. I just posted this stat on Twitter today. The Mets catchers are combined 14 for 87. That's a 161 average. And that combines the stats of Kevin Plawecki, Travis d'Arnaud, who's now out for the year, and the 2 current incoming catchers that the Mets have in Thomas Nido and Jose Lobaton. Those are guys that probably don't belong on Major League rosters. Thomas Nido, very good defensive catcher, maybe another year or so away from being warranted a Major League roster spot. I think the Mets at some point are going to have to consider addressing that position from outside of the organization. The outfield. They got 3 hitters that are very much known for their power, and if you look at the lineup 1 through 8, what is the most integral part of that lineup? It's Cespedes, Bruce, and Conforto. And combined, outside of some big hits from Cespedes, they've really not provided a lot for the offense. As Dribble Cabrera and Todd Frazier have really been coming up with the biggest hits for that team. Brandon Nimmo's looked pretty good, but he's not out there every day. There's talks, of course, about Jay Bruce playing a little first base, opening up the outfield for Nimmo to play maybe a couple more times a week. But I tell you, I'm not sold on this start. And obviously a lot of the Mets, where they sit with their record at 8 games over 500, had to do with that 12-game stretch where they won 11 out of 12. And let's be honest, I know a win was a win, but they weren't necessarily impressive. It wasn't like they were blowing the cover off the ball. They weren't dominating the opposition in that streak where they were 10 games over 500. But I'll tell you, I'm really concerned about the Nationals because I don't know if they're going to get themselves back in this race. We'll see where they are in a month. We'll certainly see where they are with Daniel Murphy and Anthony Rendon back in the lineup. But I'll tell you, I'm more concerned about the Nationals than I would normally be if they had gotten off to a slow start. Not only because of the performance of the Mets, but because of what we've seen out of the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. Once again, John Pielli here with you. The other point I wanted to get into today, was something that I obviously bothered me as a big-time baseball fan. It certainly bothered a lot of you that appreciate the game, and especially those old-time baseball fans that appreciate the sanctity of the game and the game being played the same way. The rule that they're starting in the minor leagues to put that runner at second base to start the top of the 10th inning in a tie game. And obviously everything that gets started in a minor league somehow at some point usually brings itself to the major leagues. So as baseball fans, we kind of see this coming. We may not want it to come, but we know that we have very little control over this potential rule change, which I think is going to change the complexion of the game as it's ever been played. And the thought is, even at the AAA level, to see a runner at second that didn't earn his way to second base to be there with nobody out to start the inning is not a guarantee, number one, to speed up the game, which is what baseball is looking to do. And number two is really destroying the quality of the product that we've gone to learn and know and love over our entire lives. So do we have a say in it? Well, as opposed to, going out there, putting a petition together or changing the actual rules of the game, we know we can't really do that. A petition's only going to go so far. Screaming and crying and whining about it on radio or TV, may get some other people riled up, but it may not do enough necessarily to make a change. But what we can do is we can put a protest or something involved as fans to say that we are not going to stand for this type of rule change and the game being changed and the sanctity of the game really being pulled from us without our control. And I'll tell you, if I'm at a minor league game this year and the score is tied after 9 innings and they go to put that runner at second base, which they're going to do, I'm leaving the stadium. And I don't understand why more people aren't doing this. Sure, make it a nine inning game and make a statement. Can we have in certain ballparks be cleaned out, or 75% of the fans, which we know there aren't a lot there anyway, leaving the stadium after 9 innings? Can it make enough of a statement from the fans' perspective that we are not going to tolerate this, or we may have no control but to have to tolerate it, but we do not want to see this happen at the major league level? And if I'm at a Trenton Thunder game, or if I'm at a Lakewood Blue Claws game, or any other minor league game that I get to this year, and the game is tied after 9 innings, I'm walking out. And I hope, maybe I'll yell, maybe I'll make a notion to a lot of fans. I'm not going to tell, the father that's there with his 7-year-old son that's there for the first baseball game they've been to all year. I'm not going to, make a big deal if that fan decides to stay. Or, that one person that's there to catch his one game for the entire year. But I'll tell you, if the majority of diehard baseball fans that are seeing multiple games each year are going to make a statement or have a chance to make a statement, here it is. After 9 innings, you got the right and the ability to potentially make a difference. If the cameras focus, and listen, we're talking about, minor league games played, the games that are on TV are on very local outlets, probably not seen by many people, but every camera or every radio broadcast will have to make mention to a large amount of fans that are leaving a stadium after 9 innings. And this could happen across the entire country. We as fans think that we're one fan in one little city in a huge country that has so much baseball that's being played, and we don't feel like we have a voice. We do have a voice. If we make a statement and start getting the word out, and I don't care if it's my tweet, I don't care how many times my tweets get retweeted, which we know isn't going to happen very much, but maybe somebody prominent, somebody out there that has a lot more followers, or somebody that has a lot more interaction on Twitter or Facebook can go out there and say, listen, this is something that I believe in. After 9 innings of a minor league baseball game that's tied, fans should, if you want to make a difference in regards to having the rules changed right before our eyes and have no control over it, should start walking out after 9 innings. This way we're not seeing these extra inning games with the runner at second base. We say, hey, we don't care what the results of the game are anymore because you've toyed with the rules of the game. And if TV cameras and radios pick up on the fact that after 9 innings, not only are there a couple people getting up and leaving, but people are leaving in droves. And it's happening in New Jersey. It's happening in New York. And then it starts to happen in Pennsylvania and Boston and Minnesota and Chicago and Detroit and California and Florida. And every little team that has a minor, every little city that has a minor league team, that more fans are leaving after 9 innings as opposed to staying. We can make a difference. And I really believe in that. A couple other points I want to hit up on before we get going. Once again, this is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. You got the NBA playoffs, and I'll tell you, I looked at the first round, and I was hoping to see one of these other 4 teams in the Eastern Conference get by and get to the second round. And not because I thought any of them were superior, but I think it is a sign that the power that has existed in the Eastern Conference that was supposed to only be about Boston and Cleveland, is really up in the air to who is going to represent that conference in the finals this year. Now, I think whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference is going to have a long way to go. In fact, they're going to have to show a lot more. They're going to have to play their absolute best basketball if they want a chance to beat the Golden State Warriors or whoever comes out of the Western Conference, likely the Warriors. But certainly there isn't a team in the Eastern Conference that is on level with the Golden State Warriors with a healthy Steph Curry. But, to watch the Boston series against Milwaukee go to 7 games, to watch the Cleveland series against Indiana go to 7 games. Any series that goes to 7 games, you certainly believe that either team has just as much of a chance. And both of those games came down to the wire. And both of those opposing teams, whether it was Milwaukee or Indiana, who, by the way, nobody gave them any credit coming into this postseason. Nobody looked at Indiana or Milwaukee and said that they were going to the second round. It's a shame that they didn't advance, but certainly by their performance, they deserved as much of a chance to go to the next round as the teams that ended up winning. Now, how does Cleveland deal with this? How does Boston deal with this? Obviously, Cleveland wins Game 7 on the back of LeBron James. And certainly every game that the Cavaliers won that series was because of LeBron James. Does Boston able to retool itself with their younger players, and obviously not having Kyrie Irving is going to be a big deal for them. But you're looking at Cleveland against Toronto. Is LeBron James tired after playing all those minutes, just about spending the entire time on the court throughout that entire series, or just as much in every game that mattered? I mean, is it going to finally catch up with him? The guy is a superstar. He's a legend. He's one of the best players that certainly I've seen in my lifetime, one of the best players to ever play in the NBA, and certainly, trusting him in a big game to have the ball, make a big shot, or put his team in a position to win a game. I'm trusting LeBron James over almost anybody that has been in the NBA over the last 10 years or so, and certainly better than anybody that's in the NBA right now. So Cleveland has LeBron James. Would you feel, all right, if they go out there and battle against a good Toronto team, probably an underrated Toronto team that had the best record in the Eastern Conference? Can they get by Toronto? If they can beat Toronto, then you're looking at the potential of them getting to the NBA Finals again. But all the focus, and at least as I've seen it, has been on Cleveland and has been on Boston. Toronto made it past the first round without really much discussion. And the Philadelphia 76ers, who obviously on the heels of their huge winning streak that they had towards the end of the season, finds themselves in the second round after beating the Miami Heat. How much do we believe in Toronto or Philadelphia? And how much of these upcoming series is going to be about how Toronto and Philadelphia play as opposed to how Boston and Cleveland play? So in other words, if the 76ers beat the Celtics and the Raptors beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, setting up a Toronto-Philadelphia Eastern Conference final, how much focus is going to be on how bad Boston and Cleveland played as opposed to how well Toronto and Philadelphia played? In other words, people are going to say, hey, they didn't earn it to get to the Eastern Conference as much as Cleveland and Boston blew it. It's going to be interesting to be seen. And obviously the Western Conference, I'm going to believe that somebody could beat the Golden State Warriors when they actually do. And when it comes to Houston, if we're looking at a potential Houston-Golden State Western Conference Finals, I want to see James Harden and Chris Paul show up in a big game. And I want to see Mike D'Antoni win a big game, because the three of them together have never come up big in a big game in their entire lives. We'll be back with you tomorrow, probably around 6, 7 p.m. as we do a night show. Obviously, if you want to recap everything that's going on, you can listen back via Periscope or YouTube on demand. The New York media, the New York fans, come on, you got some good baseball going on. You got the NFL draft where the Jets and the Giants just picked in the top 3, and both have upgraded their teams tremendously. Why you focus so much on WFAN's program and lineup? And the Washington Nationals, I'll tell you, I'm going to say it on May 1st, they're in trouble. Not just because of their start, but because of the emergence of the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies. Be back with you tomorrow around 6 o'clock. God bless you, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.